Welcome to our May webinar, The Future of Your Customer Communications. My name is Hanson Longfellow and I'll be your moderator today. As a company with expertise in CCM development, it is critical for our team to look to the future and be prepared to provide new services to meet new demands. We have prepared an informative look at the future of CCM and we look forward to your feedback. A couple of housekeeping items. To respect your time, we will hold all questions and comments until the end of the presentation. All participants will be muted till the Q&A period. You may enter questions into the comments area and we will try to get them answered at the end. Presenting today with his crystal ball, CCM practice lead, James Taylor. James, I guess my first question to you is, how can we know the future?
Yeah, thanks, Hanson. And the easy answer to that is we don't know for sure what the future looks like, but at Belleville, we do spend a lot of time speaking with our customers and our potential customers about what their goals are for the future. And some of what you'll see today does come from those conversations. However, as you probably know, there are a lot of analysts out there who their whole day is spent doing research on what will the future of CCM look like. So many people have heard of Gartner or Forrester, for example, and they have actually started to roll CCM into some related areas such as CX or customer experience. The bottom two that you see on the list, IDC and Novarica, they do continue to do research and reporting strictly or on traditional CCM topics. And in the middle, we have Aspire, and they are a group that really helps tie together CCM with CX. And so if you're a business who's looking to sort of take your communications into a realm where they are more customer experience focused, we do recommend taking a look at Aspire.
Well, thanks, James. We have 5 business trends here to review. I know you spent quite a bit of time selecting these 5. Let's start with what drives businesses' bottom line. How does CX tie to the bottom line?
Right, and this is something historically when we talk about CCM, it's been a little bit hard to tie good communications to a company's bottom line in that C-suite. And so when we start pushing CCM more into the CX realm, it's a very positive thing for being able to tie good communication to a company's performance and bottom line. The reason is that customer experience really focuses on customer retention, upsell, and cross-sell, and those, of course, are things that really do tie directly to every company's bottom line. CX is also a competitive factor, especially even today in industries where there's not a lot of difference between the price or the quality of a product or service. So traditionally, if someone were making a decision such as, should I get a new phone or should I switch cell phone providers, they would have asked themselves 2 questions really. What's the price and what's the quality? Well, for the future, we're actually seeing a third co-equal factor coming into play here, and that is people asking themselves, what kind of customer experience am I going to have with that cell phone provider, not only during the onboarding process, but throughout the life cycle of my engagement with that company.
So we can see that CX ties to the bottom line. If one provider only has one certain phone versus all the providers having the same phone, the same coverage, really the only difference is customer experience is better. With so many brands and companies to choose from, CX is one of the biggest contributors. How does CX change the conversation of business?
Yeah, so historically, Hanson, of course, we've seen a little bit more of a broadcasting type approach by which companies would decide what consumers want and then tell them. For the future, we're expecting much more that companies will be what we might call customer informed, meaning that they're providing what the customer really wants or needs. And that really requires us to move much more towards a conversational type of approach in our correspondence with customers. And having a back and forth, the ability to do a bi-directional conversation is going to be very important for the future. And that does require businesses to start looking at things like artificial intelligence, which will actually allow you not only to do very prompt or timely responses to customer communications, but also to be able to really understand what is a customer actually saying here in English or in the terms that people speak in rather than the terms that computers and software speak in. I do want to point out as well that while today many companies may still be taking an omni-channel approach to their CCM, meaning that they may have multiple platforms handling different channels, for example, for the future, in order to make this conversation happen, it's going to be important to have one single and global omni-channel CCM platform for the whole company. You can think of it sort of like a bicycle wheel with one central hub and many spokes coming out from that. And that's going to really allow for that coordination that's going to be needed.
So CX is leveraging all modes of communication with that central hub versus exporting a file, importing into another software, text software, sending it out, and then trying to track everything. So I would think that, this would be something that would also change how IT and the business work together.
Right, we are seeing the continuation of what you might call a more delineated line between the two. So traditionally, IT may have been involved sometimes in content edits or the back and forth that was the old approval processes. But for the future, we're seeing IT handling more just the back-end framework of CCM, having to do with things like automating the customer communications, integrating CCM with other related types of applications, and probably still being involved in those deployments from test to production and so forth. But for the future, because we're seeing so many powerful front-end CCM tools, we're really expecting the business, meaning the subject matter experts who really own the content, to be able to not only create their own content and edit their own content, but to handle all of their approvals and even to do a lot of the analysis on the front end involving things like customer journey mapping or other aspects of customer experience.
With this trend, it's important user roles get locked down. Like example, with online stores, with the controls in place, we have more information available than ever before. How does this tie into business trend number 4?
Yeah, so trend 4 is talking about CCM transparency, and we really want to think about those controls over permissions and who can see what as something that's a positive and not to be something that's afraid of, because there's so much power to be able to control who has access to what information. But what we really want to do here for the future is to have more transparency in terms of determining information that is very important, such as who created a document, who last edited a document, who approved a document or when, or how long is something valid in production, for example. This is the kind of information that if you're on an omni-channel platform across your whole organization, that visibility or transparency is something that the business can really see on demand whenever needed without having to go into ticketing queues or a lot of back and forth with emails and that kind of thing.
I can see where that would be particularly important in the proofing and updating of changes. I know that in the past I've worked in different places where we've had the file name XX the date, the file name XX the new date. So you have 10 versions of the same file with all these different changes. So being able to track them is quite a good thing, especially all in one place. What kind of opportunities do you see these new trends for service providers?
Yeah, so when we talk specifically about companies who provide communication services for other companies, we're talking B2B here and B2B customer experience. What we're finding at Belvo when we talk to our service provider customers is that they are getting a lot of interest these days from their clients in something that's called remote authoring, or sometimes known as multi-tenancy. And the concept here is, again, related to the transparency that we talked about in the last slide, in that the way that this remote authoring would work is that the service providers can actually host the CCM software in their environment and then partition it among their clients so that the service provider's clients can then access that software. They can create their own documents, edit their own documents, approve their own documents, and this is all done in such a way that there's visibility shared between the service provider and their clients. So as you can imagine, this greatly reduces a lot of the traditional back and forth research, emails, and potential for miscommunications, for example, that are more inherent in the older way of doing things. So this is something that I would think is quite, I don't want to call it revolutionary, but a sea change in terms of how service providers are able to provide a better customer experience, a B2B customer experience to their clients.
Well, this ties together many of the trends we just discussed. Essentially, it seems like CS is a true streamline of process plus customer knowledge to put together impactful and timely messages. Service providers aren't the only entities evolving, though. What about the software trends? How do they contribute?
Right, and this might be the point where people are thinking, why do I need to hear about CCM vendor trends? But I do want to tell you there are very important reasons why you should know about this. First, the software vendors spend a lot more time on what the future of CCM will look like than their customers typically do, because they really have to know now what their customers are going to need and want 5 years from now. So they're very focused on the future. But the other reason is that many people on this webinar may be thinking in the next 5 years about moving from a legacy CCM system to a modern platform, for example. And this information will help you make those kind of decisions. Other people may be on a modern platform today, but they may be thinking about doing upgrades in the near future, again, to take advantage of some of the new features that are coming over the next few years.
Well, and as an operations manager, I'm looking forward to talking about vendor trend 1, off-premises SaaS.
So this is a big one. It started, of course, before the pandemic, but the pandemic has really accelerated this vendor trend in terms of how they're licensing software. So the old model you can see in the top picture there, there's lots of hardware, there's lots of people to maintain everything, and really what you're looking at there is one big capital expenditure, basically. So in the new model, where we're actually seeing the software vendors are hosting their software in the cloud under more of like a subscription type model. And this is something that really increases the flexibility for their customers, as well as the scalability for these vendors' customers. I gave you the example of a big CapEx expenditure. Flexibility, many people are eager to try to move things more over to an OpEx type model. So another example here about the scalability of SaaS. So in the past, you've always had to have on-site under the old model, you had to have kind of like overcapacity because you needed to always be able to handle your largest demand, right? Even if that only happened rarely. Well, under the SaaS model, it's elastic, it's a rubber band, and you've got as much capacity as you need at any point in time. So you can imagine that all of this is, again, quite a sea change that we're looking at for the future, and it tends to really decrease a lot of that overhead that companies may be seeing today.
Well, one of the things that I like about it is teams can expedite new VMs in hours rather than the PCs that took days and days and some prayers sometimes. And Office 365, I cannot tell you how many times we could not find the box with the license number on it. So with Office 365 now as a service, it's great to just be able to log in, download it, and be good to go. So this landscape has definitely made APIs essential for growth.
Yeah, so Hanson, our next vendor trend is also pretty exciting, and that involves partnerships surrounding the CCM vendors. And what we mean here is not so much partnerships between the CCM vendors, although there may be some room for consolidation and such in that area, but we're talking here about how the CCM vendors are partnering with related software that's kind of surrounds the CCM space. For example, CRM software partnerships, uh, dedicated customer experience or journey mapping partnerships, as well as partnerships with software that is specific to certain industries, such as the insurance industry, for example. And by these CCM vendors partnering with related software, what they're able to do is provide a very low code and out of the box integration potential. In the past, you can probably imagine to do some integrations between CCM and perhaps some other related software, you may have needed to get pretty technical, perhaps even done some coding or something. And when we look now at the potential for low code out of the box integrations, that really increases the agility of your business because now more people can participate. And it also means that there are less of those silos, those technical silos that tend to come when you don't have those built-in, documented, supported type of partnership integrations.
We don't think about how easily our calendars are integrated with different platforms daily, along with many SSO options like Google Login. I can tell you now I probably have about 38 applications that I get in through single sign-in with Google. So I think it's good and bad, but it's convenient anyway. How are we seeing AI used in software?
Right, we talked a little bit about AI in terms of business adoption. Some more detail here on what the CCM vendors are really thinking in terms of AI for the future. So first of all, they're employing machine learning to actually shorten the time to market, especially when it comes to migrations from legacy platforms to newer platforms, for example. And in the past, you might have, on a big migration, it might have taken a year or more to really realize any of the benefits of that migration. But today, using machine learning, for example, what software can do is actually ingest huge amounts of content in whatever format that content happens to exist in. It can analyze that content very quickly, and it can do things like determine what content is the same, what content is similar. It can break content into logical pieces and actually use those pieces to assemble into a document template, for example. So you can imagine how this compares in terms of time to market to the old model when you had people like me doing analysis first and then actually having to do the actual splitting and moving and formatting of content. So this is something that really holds a lot of possibilities in shortening that time to market. The second aspect here of AI is natural language processing. And that's something that's used more in terms of not only being able to understand our languages as humans rather than computer languages, but being able to actually even for the future try to determine what is James's mood right now, what is the voice of this customer, what might they be going through right now, and really using that kind of empathetic aspect and injecting that into the sort of the whole customer life cycle.
I myself have been fooled a couple times by NPL, thinking that I was actually talking to somebody as it was directing me to where I needed to go. So it's definitely a better solution than the endless phone loops to nowhere where you just kept hitting zero trying to get to customer service.
Yes, thank you.
But I know that we're definitely looking at something besides the voice piece of it. There's also chatbots.
Yeah, so chatbots do rely on that natural language processing, and they will get better and better for the future. But we have two channels here that we think are big for the future. You mentioned chatbots as well as personalized video. And what these two channels have in common is, first of all, interactivity. Chatbots are still text-based, but it is that back and forth that we talked about earlier in the webinar. And the other aspect here that these two channels share is the importance of message relevance. You can imagine, for example, if you're using a chatbot and you're not getting relevant information back, that could actually be damaging to customer experience. So that relevance is really very important as well. Now, one thing that we should probably mention is that some companies do look towards CX as a potential cost-saving measure. For example, chatbots instead of call center. But we do really encourage people to look more at CX as a growth potential as opposed to a cost-saving measure. And the reason for that is because CX really focuses not on the company internally, but of course on the external customer. And we really want to keep that focus on that customer, be customer obsessed, and really enjoy the growth that can actually come from that. Because all the software in the world isn't going to really help you do good CX unless the people that work at the company are working under an environment and a culture where they are focused on the customers. One thing I do want to mention here is that personalized video is really, it's very interactive, and there's actually a really good site with some very good examples of these videos. It's on a site called Persona.com, and we'll have a link for you there. But it really gives you a great idea of how effective video can be in things like onboarding processes or walking a person through a utility bill. And it actually, as you interact with the video, it actually can change the video based on your interaction so that my video would be different than yours, Hanson.
As a matter of fact, James, I've had that experience recently. My ISP, I guess they're cutting edge. They sent me a bill last month, and it was $20 more. And I got my little message, clicked on the link with my phone, and it was a video addressed to me. Hey, Hanson, your bill is increased, and it showed me where, and then it, gave it a little plug for other services, and asked me if I had any questions, if I needed to be connected to somebody. So I think that's a great use of that. And I've noticed too as well with the chatbots that it'll start out kind of conversational and you think you're talking to somebody, but what's been good, I think now what I'm seeing with chatbot changes, instead of like unable to help you or call we'll call you back when we're open, you're seeing more of it getting directed to another person. So they're letting you know, oh, now Valentino is going to help you. So I do see the intelligence moving up. I think we would be remiss if we don't talk about the computers that we all carry around in our pocket daily, mobile devices.
Exactly, and this is our last vendor trend, Hanson, but it's a really, it's a big one, an important one. And the idea here, many people have probably heard of the concepts like mobile first or information as a service, and that's kind of related to what we're talking about here. The vendors believe that these devices that we all have attached to us can really serve as a communication hub, a mobile communication hub for the future. So what we're seeing even now are documents that are actually, they can actually, adjust to things like the screen size or the screen orientation. So these reactive type documents are not just a PDF that somebody has recalled for you onto your phone in a miniaturized format, but they're actually documents that are optimized for viewing on different devices, much like you see with a lot of websites today, where if you view it on your laptop, it's going to be a lot different look and feel than if you view it on a little phone screen. We're seeing that even today with documents, and that's something that a lot of the top vendors do have the capability to do today. We see that continuing for the future, using things like HTML, as well as integrating some JavaScript so that there's actually interactivity in these documents and you can kind of touch around on different things. For the future, what we're really seeing is a focus on integrating with more of the mobile apps in terms of communications, and also employing a lot of the device features that are on all of these phones and tablets, etc. So for example, we all get email and SMS on our phone, of course, but many people are also familiar with those notifications, which can be pretty helpful if they're coming from a bank account or something like that, right? Something has taken place and you need to know. So notifications or in-app messaging is very similar. Looks like we went back a slide, Hanson. There we go. In-app messaging is very similar to those notifications. It's a little bit more refined though, because you have to actually have that app open to get the communication. So that's a little bit more of a refined type of messaging. But when we look at some other things, like all of these devices have touchpads, right? So you have the potential for electronic signature gathering. They all have GPS, which really lends itself to marketing type communications. Every one of these has cameras. So just to give you an example, there are today ways to open up an insurance claim right there at the scene of a little fender bender, right? You can use your camera to take a picture of it and open that insurance claim right from your phone. Also, a big one, payments, right? Even today, the amount of payments that are taking place on these mobile devices, not just tap to pay, but also people paying bills or making purchases. This has a huge potential for the future as well in terms of communication surrounding those payments. So that's our last vendor trend for today, Hanson, and I hope everybody enjoyed those.
Well, I pay most of my bills through apps or through the online or through the bank. So luckily I haven't had to use the camera for an insurance claim yet. But I do have 2 teenagers with learning permits. So, the summer is just a couple months away. I may
There you
become
go.
familiar with it a little too soon. James, thank you for the presentation. We have time for like probably one question. We're pretty close to the end. But what effect do you think, we got one right here. What effect do you think the pandemic has had on fast tracking some of these trends?
Yeah, I think that this idea of information as a service or self-service, the ability of people to sort of find their own information as long as you're able to recall it for them on a device that they are using, that's an interesting trend that came with us all being locked in our homes, I think. But the biggest trend I'm really interested in here is that shift in licensing technique, you might call it, towards a SaaS model. This is something that I think has a potential to really lower that barrier to entry that some people have faced in terms of having to make that big CapEx plunge and really own software behind your firewall on site. The idea of being able to access that software in a full CCM suite via more of a subscription model is really an exciting development.
So would you say that that's one of your favorite trends?
It has to be. I mean, I can think of a lot of people out there who are probably now going to be able to do CCM fully in a full omni-channel platform that maybe before may not have been possible.
Wow. Well, we'd like to thank everyone for taking time to attend today. A follow-up email with a link to this presentation as well as other information will be sent to the email you registered with. Our team is here for any of your CCM development needs. We are looking forward to seeing you at our next webinar. I'll be
Thanks.
opening up thank you everybody. I'll be opening up the webinar for anybody to discuss anything if you'd like. We'll keep it open as like a lounge for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you. Doesn't look like we have any questions. All right, we'll be signing off. Thank you.